His army was gone. His allies had all abandoned. In a doorway at Koromogawa, one giant warrior stood against hundreds, holding them off as his lord prepared to die. Who was the man? Benkei died standing.
He won Japan's greatest naval battle, then became a fugitive. The man who ordered his death had shared his blood. Who destroys their own greatest general? And why does Japan still weep for him?
The year was 1159. Japan was tearing itself apart. Two warrior clans, the Taira and the Minamoto, were fighting for control of the imperial court. When a Minamoto leader launched a failed coup and was killed, his youngest son, a baby boy, was taken by the victorious Taira. His life was spared on one condition. He would be sent to a monastery and never become a warrior. His name was Ushiwakamaru. History would know him as Yoshitsune. The boy grew up at Kurama Temple, north of Kyoto, among the priests and cedar forests. But he did not become a monk. According to legend, he trained secretly in the mountains, with forest spirits, with wandering warriors, with anyone willing to teach him. He was small for his age, almost delicate in appearance, with an extraordinary quickness that made larger opponents seem slow. In those years of hidden training, he became something frightening. A swordsman of absolute precision who moved like no one had ever moved before. In 1174, a young man now called Yoshitsune crossed paths on the Gojo Bridge in Kyoto with a giant warrior monk named Musashibo Benkei, who was collecting swords from passers-by by force. Yoshitsune was the 999th man he encountered. What happened next became legend. The tiny youth defeated the enormous warrior in moments. Benkei, bound by honor, swore his loyalty forever. From that day, they were inseparable, the most unlikely pair in Japanese history, and the most devoted.
In 1180, Yoshitsune's older brother, Minamoto no Yoritomo, raised the banner of rebellion from his stronghold in Kamakura. Yoshitsune traveled east to join him, the first time the brothers had ever met. Yoritomo was cautious, political, calculating. Yoshitsune was everything he was not: impulsive, charismatic, and already spoken of with awe by every warrior who had seen him fight. Yoritomo gave his brother command of the Minamoto armies. It was the decision that would win him everything, and ultimately destroy them both. The Genpei War's decisive turn came in 1184 at Ichi-no-Tani. The Taira had fortified a coastal position that seemed impregnable. Cliffs to the rear, the sea in front. Yoshitsune studied the terrain and made a decision experienced commanders considered suicidal. He led a cavalry charge down the near vertical cliff face behind the Taira position. The horses slid and scrambled down the impossible slope. The Taira, attacked from behind by what should have been impossible, collapsed in terror. It was the kind of battlefield improvisation
that would define his entire career. In early 1185, Yoshitsune struck again at Yashima. The Taira had retreated to a fortified camp on an island, believing themselves safe. Yoshitsune crossed the sea in a fierce storm. Most captains refused the crossing as suicidal. Arrived before dawn and launched an assault the Taira hadn't imagined possible. The battle became famous for one unforgettable moment. When a Taira warrior held out a fan on a boat as a target, a Minamoto archer split it from a moving ship. It was theater as much as war. Yoshitsune understood both. On April 25th, 1185, the two fleets met at Dan-no-ura in the straits between Honshu and Kyushu, the largest naval battle Japan had ever seen. Yoshitsune ordered his archers to target the Taira helmsmen and oarsmen rather than their warriors. Without steerage, the Taira ships spun helplessly. The battle turned completely. The Taira clan, noble women, children, the child emperor himself, walked into the sea rather than surrender. The Genpei War was over. An 8-year-old emperor drowned in his grandmother's arms. And Japan would never be the same. Yoshitsune returned to Kyoto as the most celebrated warrior in Japan. Songs were written about him. Crowds lined the roads to see him pass. He had done the impossible in months. The complete destruction of the Taira. He sent word to Yoritomo, expecting celebration. What came back was silence. And then, something worse. Yoritomo had received reports that Yoshitsune had accepted an imperial appointment without permission. In Kamakura, the man who should have been celebrating was doing something else entirely. Calculating how dangerous a beloved brother truly was. Yoritomo's response was swift and absolute. He declared his own brother a traitor. He sent assassins. He posted rewards. He pressured every lord in Japan to refuse Yoshitsune's shelter. The accusations were legally thin, accepting an imperial title without permission, releasing certain prisoners. But Yoritomo didn't need a strong case. He needed a dead brother. Because Yoshitsune, beloved by the people and commanding the loyalty of every warrior who had fought under him, was a threat to the political order Yoritomo was building. A shogunate could not survive a rival this popular. Yoshitsune fled with a handful of loyal followers, Benkei among them. They traveled in disguise across Japan, a fugitive party led by the country's most famous warrior. Every lord they approached had to weigh loyalty against survival. One by one, allies turned them away. They attempted to sail west to raise a new army. A storm scattered the fleet. They turned north toward the remote territories of the Fujiwara clan at Hiraizumi, who had offered protection. It was the longest retreat of Yoshitsune's life, and it would only end one way. Lord Fujiwara no Hidehira welcomed Yoshitsune at Hiraizumi, the one domain where Yoritomo's power was still uncertain. For nearly 2 years,
Yoshitsune lived in a kind of frozen peace, protected by an old man who admired him genuinely. But in 1187, Hidehira died. His dying words to his son, Yasuhira, were clear. Protect Yoshitsune at all costs. Yasuhira listened respectfully. Then Yoritomo's letters arrived, threatening war if Yoshitsune was not surrendered. A decision was made. The old man's final wish lasted less than 2 years. On June 15th, 1189, Yasuhira's forces surrounded Yoshitsune's residence at Koromogawa. Yoshitsune had perhaps 50 men against hundreds. It should have been over in moments. But in the gateway of the compound stood Benkei, grievously wounded, bristling with arrows, barely standing. He held his ground through arrow after arrow, refusing to fall, holding the enemy at bay, while inside, his lord prepared to die with honor. The soldiers said later they had been afraid to approach. A man who will not fall is more frightening than any number of men who can. The soldiers later said they were afraid to approach even after Benkei had fallen, because he died standing. His body remained upright, supported by the arrows that had pierced him. Only when they finally touched him did he fall. Inside the compound, Yoshitsune had killed his wife and children to spare them capture, then composed himself and committed seppuku. He was 31 years old. The most brilliant military mind of his age died alone in a northern outpost, betrayed by the brother he had made supreme ruler of Japan.
The Japanese have a phrase for what they felt about Yoshitsune: hanganbiki, sympathy for the lieutenant. A cultural reflex toward the talented and loyal person destroyed by the powerful and jealous. Yoshitsune embodied every quality the warrior tradition claimed to honor: brilliance, loyalty, physical courage, absolute devotion to his lord. That the Lord destroyed him made the tragedy complete and immortal. In a culture where defeat and loyalty are often more celebrated than victory and power, Yoshitsune became the perfect tragic hero. The legend of Yoshitsune did not end at Koromogawa. Within a century of his death, stories circulated that he had not really died, that Benkei had died in his place, and Yoshitsune had escaped north, across the sea to the Asian continent. The most extraordinary version claimed he eventually became Genghis Khan, who would conquer half the known world. The theory has no historical support whatsoever, but the fact that Japanese people preferred to believe their greatest hero had survived in any form says everything about how deeply he was mourned. 8 centuries have not diminished Yoshitsune's hold on Japan. He appears in the oldest kabuki plays, in novels, in manga, in anime, in video games. Every generation
reimagines him. The boy who trained in the mountains. The commander who crossed the sea in a storm. The warrior whose greatest friend died standing in a doorway. Yoritomo built the Kamakura shogunate and ruled Japan. But it is Yoshitsune that Japan remembers. Evidence that what a culture chooses to grieve reveals more about its values than what it chooses to celebrate.
Yoritomo had gotten what he wanted. His brother was dead. Japan was his. He established the Kamakura shogunate in 1192, Japan's first military government, and 7 centuries of samurai rule began. The age that Yoshitsune's genius had made possible was the age that erased him from official history. But Yoritomo's own dynasty did not last long. His sons were weak. His line ended within 2 generations. The generals he had empowered were already asking the question that would define the next 300 years. What did it actually take to hold power in Japan? The story of Yoshitsune is the story of what samurai culture could not contain. A warrior too brilliant, too beloved, too genuinely heroic for the political world he served. Every generation of Japanese history would produce someone like him. A talent that made the powerful uncomfortable. A loyalty that made destruction necessary. The next chapter in this story takes us forward 300 years to the age of the great warlords, when the lesson of Yoshitsune about the terrible cost of being too good at what you do would play out again on an even faster stage. Minamoto no Yoshitsune died at 31, alone in the far north, a fugitive from the man he had made supreme. He had never been defeated in battle. He had never betrayed anyone. He had simply been too brilliant, too beloved, and too dangerous to be allowed to live. Japan did not forget him. Japan cannot forget him. Subscribe for a new episode every day. The next story from the age of the great warlords begins soon.